Welcome to Globespan 24x7 as we bring you Monday night program. We are sorry for the delay. We had some technical issues, but now we are back live with you. We want to thank our sponsor, Noir Singh, for making this platform available. And of course, Devian Bisu, our technical specialist. This evening, we have a very special guest. No stranger to us. She has been in the gutters, the fighting, one of those women that we can be proud of in our country. In the previous PP government, she was Minister of Education. In this government, she had been reappointed to that ministry. So Minister Priya Manickchand, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very glad to come back. I'm always happy to answer questions that we have and bring clarity to our positions in education.
Thank you, Minister. And of course, you meet Dr. Rose, my co-host.
Thank you,
yes,
Charles,
of
and
course.
welcome, Madam Minister, to the only fair and balanced network, Globespan 24x7.
That's nice to hear that. Before we start, Minister, today we also want to acknowledge the death anniversary of Walter Rodney. We know on June 13th, that Black Friday 1980, he was murdered, assassinated, killed, whatever you want to call it. And up to this day, we don't know who the killer was or the killers were. Or if it is known,
you don't know.
We do not.
I am pretty satisfied that I know who did it.
Well,
I think the country feels like we are satisfied that we know it was the PNC that killed Dr. Rodney. I don't think there are questions about that anymore.
Okay, thank you, Minister. But I was trying to get the person who would have done it, but you're right. Of course, the PNC would have been involved in it. Was it the government, the highest level of the government? I know there were many reports prepared, but I don't think any was made public. If I'm correct, I might be wrong.
No, there was a public inquiry, and those reports are out there. But moving on, I don't want to minimize the tragedy that happened on the 13th of June 1980 because it was a tragedy. It marked very significantly the period we were in, and it spoke to what dictatorships do. Outside of it took away from this country the abilities and potential of a brilliant man, and took away from his family and children their father and husband. And so I don't want to minimize that, but I can say that we are going to shortly, we're working with the Rodney children, particularly Asha and Mrs. Rodney, to get his works published in schools and to get them distributed in schools, and to do some other work that would let young people know the value of this human being that walked amongst us. And I want to remind people that the 5 months that we spent fighting for elections, for the results of elections to be announced as people's will, that would give effect to the will of the people of this country, were an important 5 months. Because when you don't have free and fair elections, when you have people who could stay in power, not by winning hearts and souls, not by serving so that people want them again, but simply by cheating their way in, the result is Walter Rodney. That is not drama. That is not exaggeration. This is what happens in countries where their democratic rights are trampled upon. That is the result. People die. Freedoms are taken away, and things that we have become accustomed to in this country will simply go if we were not to make sure that we fight for, and that we did fight for, and maintain those freedoms that we have been taking for granted.
Thank you, Minister. You've put it over really wonderfully. I couldn't do it the way you did it. But of course, on behalf of...
And it's important, as we were on the topic, recently, less than 2 years ago, the person who is championing the WPA's cause right now, which I think is a great travesty, David Hines, said very clearly when there was a doubt, all right, well, we're not too sure what happened in the election, but give grain to the country and let them come back to an election a couple years from now, or let him lead. And so he was quite prepared to ignore what the people of the country wanted, ignore what they said at the ballot box through their vote, and just give it to his guy because he was in some kind of a coalition with him. And that is who is in the WPA now, and that is the greatest tragedy you could think of when you think of what Dr. Rodney gave for the very freedoms that we were trying to protect, which he so casually said, oh, forget about that, forget about people's will and so on. Hand it to Granger because Granger was his guy. I mean, that is such a, he should not be speaking on behalf of Dr. Rodney ever, my view.
Okay, Minister. And of course, on behalf of Globespan and all of us here, we want to extend to Mrs. Rodney and to the children our love and appreciation. We know what you went through, as Minister rightly said. You lost your husband, you lost a father, and of course, Guyana lost a great leader. Minister, in talking about that, there's also a little thing brewing up here in New York. I don't know if you heard of it, but Congressman Jeffrey, he was at a church over the weekend, and we want to address that maybe next week with some other panelists. But he talked of this racial problem that we have in Guyana. The Ministry of Education, of which you're a head, is there a program, Minister, to help us to hopefully eradicate this illness that has dragged us down some really, really bad channels? Is there anything the Ministry of Education is doing to help our children to grow up in an environment where race is not the top of the agenda?
So I will answer you two ways. Yes, because we are very clear that the only way we can move forward as a country is effectively and speedily is by ensuring that each child understands the value of the next child, regardless of color and religion or geographical location. The president has spoken very clearly and has been very consistent in his call for one Guyana and for us to move forward as one Guyana. But to you premised your entire question to me on it appears as though what the congressman said is true. It is not. The congressman has been unfortunately influenced by Rickford Burke, who again, unfortunately, because I think he could contribute so much more to Guyana if he were to be truthful and constructive rather than being the obstructionist that he is trying to be. You are not here, but Dr. Rose says he's here. And he's a good person to say whether you see the race problems that the congressman spoke of. When we're giving cash grants, which last year we gave $19,000 to each child, this year it will be $30,000. When we are giving textbooks, when we are awarding places in schools, when we are hiring teachers or training teachers, we do not look at ethnicity. This is the criteria. You're a child in school, your name is on the register, you get this. So ethnicity, what he's saying, if that were true and we're serving only one race, then you would have heard that cry across the country on very many different issues. Of course, you have particular interest groups that may host in them one ethnicity over and above another. If you're talking about persons from the hinterland, you're almost 100% talking about Amerindians. That is just because that is physically where they are geographically. If you're talking about, but every other group has a cross section of persons, including the sugar workers. People make it out to be that they're only East Indians. That is actually not true. That is significantly not true. So I don't accept the congressman's claim. Well, not claim, but his professing that he will come here to fix an issue. To be that there is an issue. There is more racism in America. Easily. More instances, more amongst the population, more institutionalized racism in terms of how for example, which has been on the discussion a lot lately, how your police force and the various police forces across the country deal with Black youth who have been, who appear to be engaged in activities that the police force may treat a little bit harsher. So I don't, what the congressman says is not based in truth. He is influenced by someone who is rabidly racist and who I believe has far more value than that, but he doesn't, he chooses to use that as his crying call because I think he understands the emotive pull to talk about discrimination along ethnic lines. I don't see how that could help us in any way. You could ask anyone in this country. There are people who disagree with me, may disagree with a policy, may disagree with the way one is implemented, but none of them will tell you that my policies or my service is ethnically imbalanced. None of them, not even the worst PNC critic of mine, will say that. And so it's just not true. Are there instances where people in the country hold strong views, bigoted views? Of course, but that is gonna happen anytime you put a large enough collection of persons together. Someone amongst them will be racist or sexist or homophobic and bigoted in some other way, and it's the state's duty to make sure as far as we can we educate to remove that from individuals. But institutionalized racism or ethnic discrimination from the state to the people of this country does not exist. So Mr. Congressman was wholly misled.
Thank you for addressing that, Minister. Before Dr. Rose come on, again, are there programs in our schools to address any racial problem that might erupt within the school system or wherever it? I mean, as you said, there is no racial.
So,
there's racial undertone everywhere, right? But when it raises ugly head, it becomes a problem. Well, how are we teaching our children to put race aside, and that should not be a part of you growing up as a young Guyanese?
Well, countries around the world who try to teach of the innate value of the human being, because countries around the world have, some countries where your color looks the same, then you have different kind of class structures that are recognized and that can be used to be divisive. In the Asian countries, African countries, for example. So countries around the world try to educate their young populations to recognize the value in each person. So, that sounds like a big, nice, fancy word, but that John, who's a different color and a different religion, is just as good, just as bad, has the same opportunities and challenges as you do in your home. How could we now not remove those cultural differences and richness, but how could we educate so that you could benefit from whatever my culture is and I could benefit from yours? And so across the school systems in the public and private sector, we have a whole set of observances that lend towards tolerance and an understanding of each other's values and religions and so on. So you have national days where people dress like the ethnic groups. You have on Muslim holidays, children wear clothes that might look like Muslim, bring food that might be traditionally done by persons of Islamic background. On the Hindu holidays, same thing. Coming up, I think the next holiday we have may very well be Emancipation Day. That's going to be, although it's a holiday, a school holiday, children of all ethnicities understanding what happened on that day. It's taught actively in the classroom. So yes, we do teach to remove bigoted behavior, but I don't see any large measure that kind of behavior. We actually have more bullyism happening against children perceived to be identifying sexually as not along the majority line.
I got.
But we do not see any great big bullyism based on ethnicity or religion or gender. We don't.
Okay. Dr. Rose?
And this is statistically speaking. So I mean, if we're talking about what numbers we have where one child of one ethnicity bullied another child of another ethnicity, our numbers on that would be very, very small. The numbers would be bigger based on a whole set of other reasons. That is statistically what is the reality in the country.
Okay.
Madam Minister Manickchand, as you know, a good education leads to good paying jobs, and in most cases, and that in turn leads to, as you know, reduce poverty, reduce crime, and create decent and productive citizens. That said, you have introduced a program to help school dropouts go back and rewrite CXC exams, and also those who fail the exam to go back and rewrite it. But that program you introduced there seems to be very, very good. Can you explain the details so that our audience can know what to do and how to apply to for the program?
Right. So that's not to rewrite CXC. It's actually giving people a second chance. Adults, well, it doesn't have to be adults, but most likely it will be either very young, the upper end of the teenage years, or adults simply because of realities and age. So you know the GED in America. If your exit at grade 12, that's what you take, and then that's your high school diploma. That's what we're offering through the Texila University. And then SCQF, which is a Scottish qualification that sort of is equivalent to a high school exit. And we're offering that through Jane University. So it's not a rewrite of CXC. It's to allow persons to exit high school with these two, choosing one or the other, so that you have either the GED, not the equivalent of the GED, or the SCQF. After which, universities such as Texila, Jane, we're working with the University of Guyana, the CPC Training College, higher level institutions of learning, tertiary institutions will accept these students to study. So it's really allowing persons to get a second chance to finish high school, but not CXC. There are other facilities where people can write CXC if they so wish, go to private lessons and so on, but this is not CXC. And you spoke of poverty and education being a good way of removing poverty. You know, in 1991, the World Bank, the International Financial Institution, as a bank, did a study on Guyana, and they said at that time that 67% of our people were living in poverty, and 35% were living in dire poverty. And then the same World Bank, same organization, same measurement parameters were used in or around 2008, and they said that Guyana had cut poverty in half. And you can see the relationship. So now instead of 67% of our people living in poverty, it was just 32 or something. And you can see the relationship. In 1992, when I wrote CXC, 9% of our population had passed English. It's now in the 60s, 60 something percent. Still not what we'd like. We'd like 100%. But you can see the correlation between trained teachers and good grades and poverty levels dropping, a prudent management of the economy and debt rate. When the PPP first took office under Dr. Jagan, I really don't know how he managed, but we weren't even making enough to pay our debt. We weren't even earning enough as a country to pay our debt. And we've moved from that to a place where we're so comfortable, but it wasn't easy. I made that sound easy. In under 5 years, you saw how squandermania and poor policies and bad tax regimes and neglect of certain sectors that usually drive growth and almost attack on the private sector, how very quickly you saw gains that were made getting dwindled away. So it's very important that we understand, not only as a government and as a political party, but as a people, certain institutions have to stay buoyant, regardless of who's in office. And people of this country must invest in making sure that happens.
Minister, as you know, education, without education, no country can actually develop. So your ministry is vital to the development of Guyana. There's no question about that. And anyone who have looked at your programs as I did over the past 18 to 20 months can see an improvement in education. This is not being tilting anything towards you or back, but you and your team have done a good job in the past 18 months. And I will say that, and that is, there's proof to show that. By establishing tutorials for students in low performing schools, I've read about that, summer learning, after school teachings and so forth. But my question to you, are these programs successful and are they yielding results?
So it's a little early to speak. I mean, I could sit here and say that the easy thing that would make us all look good. But before I answer, let me say very clearly, I think without a question, while we have had individual persons doing very well and great officers along over the years, I think without any doubt that this is the ministry, and it was very carefully put together, that has the best collection of officers at the same time. And so I feel particularly lucky, although it wasn't luck. We actually crafted that based on needs of the ministry and what we're looking for. But some of the things we're doing is very early, so you can't measure it as yet, but we can see based on usage and number of persons. Look, one of the things we did over COVID was to create worksheets for every single subject at every single level. So what you had was the front of the worksheet had the facts and the story and the lesson, and then as you went on, they had exercises and questions and so on. Now that we're consulting around the country on transforming education, you know, teachers are saying to us, that's what we need. Don't give us these textbooks. The textbooks are complicated, they're long, they're expensive, they're heavy. While the textbooks are a good buttress, right now to get back on our feet, we need that sort of worksheet compilation, because it really speaks to exactly what we need and what we do. And we have expanded the learning channel and the radio, not only made more people able to get it, but we also are, so by the end of this year, the entire country is going to have access to the country's dedicated channel to learning and education. And we've expanded that now, and it's going to be 6 channels dedicated to learning and education. I have no doubt that will make an impact, but you're asking me to tell you right now what the impact is, and it's very difficult to do that because measurement at this point is it's too early to measure some of the impact of some of the interventions. But the usage of same suggests to me that the wide usage, that if we're careful with the kind of effort we put into crafting the programs on these, means that the impact is going to be significant.
Now,
I can tell you one of the things that I could tell you right now. We went online with the Cyril Potter College of Education. I'm not sure if you were following that. So when I came into office in August 2020, the college was closed and there was no prospect. Nobody knew when it would open, how it would open, because we were all staying home from COVID. We took a decision that we were going to go online. At the time that we took that decision, the highest number of students, the Cyril Potter College of Education, which is Guyana's only training college for teachers, ever graduated, was 535 students per year. Since we went online, we have quadrupled that amount. Our entrance, the people we let into the college last year, numbered close to 2,000. This year, we have about 4,000 applications. So we are aiming, and I'm saying to you with confidence, that by 2025, we will have 100% trained teachers or teachers who are in training, 100% in the school system. We will also have more trained teachers. Now, let me tell you the impact of that in the hinterland. Right now, just about a very small number of teachers in the hinterland are trained, on the 30%. The hinterland is where we have the least resources. We have no access. People don't have textbooks. They can't run in a shop. They can't do photocopies and so on like that. So we actually need the most trained teachers in the hinterland. Our results at the end of CXC or NGSA very clearly show that most vulnerable education districts are regions 1, 7, 8, and 9. We're going to, because of this move to go online with CPC, we are going to be able to put far more teachers and more trained teachers in the hinterland communities. And that's always been something Guyana has been unable to do. So I could tell you even before we begin to measure that anywhere you put trained teachers versus untrained teachers, you get better results. So it's not everything we have to measure. We could tell you now that you're going to see better results because of that CPC expansion. We just also took the University of Guyana, I say we loosely because we don't run the University of Guyana, the University of Guyana's council runs it, but the Vice Chancellor very responsive to the country's needs. And she just over the last year put the university degree, the education and degree fully online, so that people across the country could now access that. Before, if you were in Berbice, you could study maths, English, social studies, and science if you wanted to be a teacher. You couldn't do the TVET subjects. You couldn't do any enrichment subjects. You couldn't do those other kinds of stuff because it was not on the campus. You had to come down to Turkine, leave your home, travel every day, expend a whole set of money. And because of that, people didn't do it. That has changed. We've now equalized what people in Berbice and Essequibo and Region 9 could get. Those are significant changes that will really positively impact the system. So I'm looking forward to that being completed.
Even though the pandemic was there, Guyana school performance has increased based on CXC results, especially in the hard sciences. But when I ask the question, there's always a but. But how do you intend to retain teachers who are leaving for better paying jobs in the Caribbean and elsewhere?
So we are not seeing, that's a very common question I get, but I'm not seeing large numbers of teachers leaving. There was a time, teachers leave every year, but there was a time when there were organized efforts by, I remember Botswana, Canada. There were organized efforts to take our teachers from here to those countries, not just by the way, if you apply and you get through. People came down here and actively recruited hundreds of teachers and took them away. We don't have that happening now. I just told you something which surprised me, so I'll repeat it for you. This year, we have more than 4,000 persons applying to teach, applying to go to the college so that they could be teachers. So our starting salary as a teacher, see, people say these things and they become cliches that become truth. But our starting salary as a teacher is actually more than you would get as a clerk in a bank, as a teller in a bank. And so people are choosing teaching. Now, I am not going to sit here and tell you it's it's the top of the line kind of profession in terms of salaries. It is not. There's still much room for improvement, as there is regarding teachers across the country. I don't really think you could pay teachers to do what they do. I don't care how high you raise the salaries. Teachers are doing so much more than teaching. But the starting salary is not so bad. People are actually choosing teaching now to over and above other kinds of jobs that used to be attractive before. That should speak to you about it not being as badly as it used to be.
Here's a question for you, Madam Minister. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the retirement age for teaching, I would say the public service too, should increase from 55 to 62, given the fact that most people are in their prime at age 55, and that the lifespan in Guyana has increased. For women, it's 78 years. For men, it's 74 years. Prior to this, it was 62 and 66.
Yeah. So, those are some of the questions that are occupying people in the country. And I'm glad about that. I'm glad we're having healthy conversations around them. I look at teachers who tell me they want to retire at 30, retired, we don't want to do this anymore, and they complain about everything. But then I look at teachers who say 55 is way too early. You should give us some more time. And we have actually rehired teachers, which says that clearly they're able to do more. So it's an active conversation. How do I feel? I think if as a country we have moved to take up the life expectancy over a number of years with specific interventions that resulted in people being able to live longer because we're taking care of them health wise and otherwise in the country better, then surely we can look at some movements upward and so on the retirement age. These things though have financial implications in 100 different ways, on NIS, on benefits, on the salary, on the wage bill. So it's not as simple. And then you have, these are things that require wide consultation because we hear from the people who want a change, and sometimes one voice could be far louder than 100 voices who like it the same way it is. So I think we have to give people a fair chance to all be able to equally contribute. But I've seen some of these conversations being ventilated publicly, and it's interesting. The conversation on whether you should be allowed to carry a weapon as easily as the US allows it. And there are people who think we should be, that it's a right. And there are people who say, well, look at the United States. People are carrying weapons and they're now trying to turn that around. And there are adverse circumstances. There are conversations on whether we should allow tinted vehicles or not. There are conversations on whether we should allow same-sex marriages or not. So we have a lot of healthy discussion around some of these social issues, and that's the way it should be. And then I think policies are made based on, not I think, policies, a good way to govern is to make policy based on the evolution of society after consulting with the people who will be end users. And that's kind of how we do it. So I think there will be robust conversations on many of these issues.
One last question before we go on break and before Charles comes in. When you left office in 2015, the government instituted a program where each parent will have $10,000 per head per child. You came back and APNU did not increase that. I think they decreased it or threw the program out completely. You came back to office, you increased that $15,000 plus $4,000 for uniform, $19,000. And this year it's going to be $30,000. What is the cutoff point? Is this going to go up, continue forever?
So the government had said, we had said very clearly, the PPP as a party and the PPP as a government, when we did this in 2014, it was in 2015, that it was the beginning of a cash grant program that we were doing for children, and that each year it would raise until it reached $50,000. So there was always that conversation. And that conversation was that promise, that was the commitment, that we would raise this incrementally year after year until it reached $50,000, at least $50,000. At that point, we hadn't found oil and so on. We were still exploring. APNU came in and said it was a political gimmick. We meant to just buy people's votes, and they quashed the program entirely. Not reduced it, they quashed it entirely. They said it was not sustainable. That program at that time cost $1.6 billion to give every child in public school, not private school, $10,000. So they said we couldn't do this. They quashed the program, but their dietary bill went up by more than $1.6 billion. So it's just a matter of priorities. They thought it was better to eat and feed people better, themselves, not people, because if it was the children getting the meals, I wouldn't mind at all. But themselves better, increase how they ate and the foreign things they bought and so on, rather than give $10,000 to each school child. We came in immediately. We promised again on the campaign trail that we were going to reinstitute the cash grant and then raise it until it became $50,000 per child. First year, we gave $15,000. Second year, we're giving $25,000. That's this year. And before the end of our term, it will be at least, and I'm saying here with a big hint, at least $50,000. It could very well be more. And we are very clear that this is money that is it's a good investment. It's going to be used sensibly. The majority of parents I know, a large majority, spend everything they can on their children. Their entire life revolves around making their children's lives better and easier and with less struggle. And that program is going to be complemented. Every grade 6 child come September, every grade 6 child for the first time in this country will get breakfast from the government of Guyana. A nutritious, healthy breakfast that is consistent and reliable, made by persons in the community. Things like black eye and chana and roti and curry and egg balls and so on. So things that children can not only get a full stomach on and learn more, but also things that nutritious, healthy meals. And so we have consistently, it was under us that the uniform grant started, where President Jagdeo walking around and people said, you know, the PPP has one of the hallmarks about the PPP government is they constantly are in touch with ministers, are in touch with people. And the president, and you know, in his presidency, he was visiting somewhere and somebody said, yes, you're building all these fancy schools, but we're having trouble outfitting our children to send them to school. The uniform grant came into being. We left, it stayed at the same price, the same fund. We came back in, we raised it again. The PPP has a history of reinvesting any kind of windfalls and gains and so on back on people of this country. And so when we instituted VAT and we had more money, what did we do? We raised old age pensions. We gave a water waiver. We gave an electricity waiver to old people. We gave more money on the uniform grant. So that's how we spend money. The APNU had collected more than $62 billion per year in new taxes, and that was not seen reinvested in people. So they actually had that much more money than we had, and they didn't give back any to the children of the country. So it's just a different philosophy on how we use resources in the state.
Okay, Minister, indirectly what you're doing there, you know, our country needs a lot of children, so you're encouraging our mothers to get more children, which is a good thing. We'll take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue this discussion.
Is when this wedding got done? Right now my belly burning for the 7 curry. But them fancy people just call it vegetarian food. I just call it 7 curry.
Order your 7 curry or vegetarian box today from allfromonesupplier.com and get free shipping throughout the US. The 2022 competition is in Cancun on July 28th to August 1st. Who is going? The Duck and the Curry going for sure, plus Raymond Ramnarine, Terry G, young upcoming dancer, and singer Ariana, Randy Reckless, and the Reckless Tassa Group. The competition for the best tasting duck is in Cancun for 2022. Friends and families, make this a reunion.
Break it down, 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 ding. Break it down, down, break it down, down, ding. Hey yo, my sweet son, say I'm addicted to you.
Family and friends meet up in Cancun on July 28th. Enjoy your culture, your music, and your duck. For more info, call Travelspan at 212243085. That is 212243085. In Canada, call 64755762000. In Trinidad, call Amerals at 6451604. And in Guyana, 2271701, or visit us at travelspan.com. Looking for a reliable contractor? Look no further. Call Sings Construction today. At Sings Construction, they can cover all your jobs, interior and exterior. We cover painting, bathrooms, kitchen, doors, windows, tiles, brick, decks, flooring, and concrete. Call Naresh Singh today for your free quote at 9172384180. That's 9172384180.
Folks, the Nest Restaurant is the place to dine for Guyanese and Caribbean dishes. It is the best restaurant in Queens. The staff is courteous, and Dave, the owner, is always there to welcome you. So for a memorable dining experience, visit the Nest Restaurant located at 12717 101 Avenue, South Richmond Hill. Go and make a reservation today, or takeout. Call 718-847-4035.
Okay. Welcome back to our audience. We want to thank you for staying on as we have with us the Honorable Minister of Education, Minister Priya Manickchand. Minister, before we went to break, you mentioned the CPC online program that permit many teachers to attend classes without going to the physical campus. And when you were on before, in our previous broadcast, we had mentioned the need for students to listen to the lectures of teachers, or some of our best teachers, if that's the right word to use, for like every grade. Is that part of the program as well?
So we're trying to do some master teaching, if that's what you mean. So for example, if there is a really good science teacher, physics teacher at Queen's College, and Sand Creek in the hinterland in Region 9 and Northwest Secondary in Region 1, don't have physics teachers, which we have a shortage of in the country. Actually, there's a shortage in the world. Then this one teacher could stay there and teach using technology. Of course, a large part of the success of that would be there's a heavy dependence and reliance on internet and devices. Devices we can take care of. It's internet connectivity that doesn't come quickly or cheaply in any country. I think we have really done a lot between, just because COVID, of course, accelerated plans, but we've really done a lot in the last 18 months. We're far, far, far away from universal coverage of internet access and reliable internet. So some places have, but they're not reliable at that speed. So, and that's not something we alone are struggling with. Even in the US, they have these struggles with trying to get reliable internet. But yes, we are engaging in some of that. For example, last year, teachers from the coast here taught students in the hinterland and prepared them for CXE. And not one region. They had lessons going on in 5 or 6 regions. It was all online. Excellent. So it's really a lot of opportunities have been opened up because of COVID that we need to not let slip through our fingers. And that's unfortunate. I'm also seeing some schools that did really well with it. They've done Google Classrooms. They really mastered the usage of that. Now that we're out face to face, they've dropped the entire all the
online classes
that they acquired, all the skills, all the resources that they invested in, just completely gone back to face. So we are actually looking for a consultant. We've identified someone who may have the skill, I think, coming out of Peru, to come and talk to and set up in some of our schools, not just the face-to-face engagements, but how we can use internet effectively and technology effectively.
Well, our technical specialist, Devin Bissou, is qualified as well. You can tap on him. He can help you do that.
That's a good
Minister, don't forget foreign language as well, because when I was going to secondary school, our Spanish teacher left when we were in Form 2, and that was it. There was no more Spanish teacher for the rest of the school, for the entire life of the high school. So if maybe foreign language can also be a part of that online teaching.
So that like you, mine wasn't Spanish, it was French. I wanted so badly to do French. I just found it romantic and very like a very nice language. And I wasn't able to because we didn't have French teachers. In the summer, our August holidays, we are throwing up Spanish lessons on the Learning Channel, where we're saying to people, if you tune in at X hour every day on channel so-and-so. By the end of 6 weeks, you will be at a proficiency level of basic or intermediate, that kind of thing. And so it's not only in the classroom, we're trying to use the mode of distance education, radio and TV, to be able to get not only students, but, the population along. What we are talking about right now and we want to do is that every student must leave competent. And I say competent as distinct from having written and passed an exam. Every student must have a second language, a sport, an instrument, a TVET area, agriculture or home ec or one of those, and some level of an understanding and practice of volunteerism. And if every student leaves our high school system with all the academic qualifications they have, plus a good exposure to those 5 areas, we believe we could have more rounded children. And so we're currently exploring that right now.
Excellent. Minister, for the internet, the Bill Gates Foundation, I'm told they give a lot of grants to these things. So maybe your ministry can approach that Bill Gates Foundation through the U.S. Embassy or wherever. I don't know where you can access that. The last time we spoke, Minister, we spoke of the duty-free concession for senior masters, deputy head, and head teachers. Has that been resolved now? Are you having that under control, that nobody's complaining?
No, there's still, so what's happening, it's the government, the PPPC government, and I'm making the distinction because there is a distinction to make, had negotiated with the Guyana Teachers Union that while we mightn't be able to pay significant sums more on the salary, there are certain benefits we can give that would make teaching more attractive and make teachers more motivated and make them look forward to promotions and so on. And that 2 of those benefits were duty-free concessions to senior persons and scholarships to teachers. Those 2 used to be run and managed by the Guyana Teachers Union. And there were several complaints that they were being used to keep teachers in line. So if you were a union member, you could get it. If you're not, you can't. If you were a union member who had spoken up against one of your union executives, you can't get it and all that. So they had a lot of other things attending whether or not those benefits were enjoyed by all equitably. So the ministry took that over in their criteria, not just saying who we like. It's this criteria. We're looking for people in these areas to study. We're looking for people in these regions. They're given priority and so on. So I haven't heard complaints about that recently because we've resolved many of those.
How is the ministry relation with the union?
So the ministry and the union have a robust relationship. Personally, I hold the view that the union is Unions generally really do noble work. They do what the rest of us went to school and had our parents pay to make us learn how to represent people fairly and so on. And that's what they do, and that is noble work. Unions generally will have some level of, I don't want to say combative, but there will be some positions that are not reconcilable with unions and their principles. If unions get political, it's always problematic. And so my relationship with the union and the ministry's relationship with the union continue to be, I think, excellent. We have disagreements. But we meet the union frequently, several times a month, sometimes on different issues. We'll have disagreements over, I'm very, very sure, over the period. And once it's coming from a genuine place, I try to understand that. But the union was getting political. They were being used politically, and they seem to have been an arm of the APNUAFC based on some of the positions that they were taking. I think the union's membership has stood up against that. There were recent elections, and the turnout they ever had, still very small. So the executive wasn't voted in by the majority of teachers by any chance, but they had the largest turnout ever. And I think that spoke to what people wanted in the union. So I hope the executive heard that. But we have a pretty decent relationship.
Excellent. Minister, I know you went to West Demerara, I think, was it a couple of months ago, and you made West Demerara Secondary Form 6 classes there, I believe?
Yes.
Is there other
Westdam
schools
and,
across Guyana
and
that you're
Regina.
putting in grade 6? I mean, is it grade 13 or form 6? What is it?
So it's grade 12. It's your grade 12,
Oh.
12 and 13. So 12 and 13 is really upper and lower 6. What you know is upper and lower 6. So we did that last year at Regina and West Demerara Secondary. We're looking to do it at Annandale and Tagore in Barbies. And yeah, I think those two schools more at this point. It's really space. We actually have to get the physical space at some of those schools before we can do it. And I'm glad to be able to do that. A lot of students have stayed in the regions to go to those schools because they're now sixth forms and they feel like they will offer more. A lot of students who ordinarily would have had to, they would be forced to leave Asquith and come to go to a QC or a Bishop's, no longer have to do that. They can stay at home in the comfort of their home, in the safety of their home, and continue to get a solid education at some of these schools.
And they can also have the ability to listen to lectures from teachers in Queen's College and Bishop.
They can because of the same master program. Yes, master
okay.
teacher program.
And do you have to get additional teachers or the same teachers that
no,
teach?
So part of how we determine which school is ready for the list for the sixth form is not only physical space, where would we put this classroom, but do they already have teachers teaching those subjects? So at QC, you don't have sixth form teachers. You have teachers that teach INTI science in Form 1 or grade 7, and the same teacher teaches chemistry at 4th form, and the same teacher teaches chemistry at 6th form. So where you have teachers that could carry the programs is one of the requirements for whether or not we can do sixth form at those schools.
And some of those teachers, they are available for scholarship to enhance their academic qualification.
So more than 3,000 teachers have accessed the GOAL, Guyana Online Academy of Learning, which is getting masters and PhDs and degrees at renowned universities overseas in Asia, Europe, the West Indies, North America, where they are still teaching, but getting their masters or specific training, specialized training in scholarships. And right now we have more than 4,000 teachers pursuing additional learning outside of their degrees.
How many teachers do we have in our school system in Guyana?
We have just under 12,000.
12,000. And secondary and primary?
So secondary would have the least number of teachers. Primary has the most number of teachers, and nursery is just under.
I got primary. You. Okay. Dr. Rose?
Madam Minister, I have a tricky question for you here. And I received this from a couple of teachers. They said overcrowding is prevalent in many schools. My question to you is this: are there enough primary and secondary schools in the country, given the fact that the student populations increased over the years and the school building of new schools have not catch up with the student population?
Right. So we have achieved, not by our standard, the United Nations has declared us as having achieved universal primary education. That means that children all across the country can access a primary school. We also have the highest enrollment rate at the nursery school in the Commonwealth Caribbean. So we have more than 90% of our children accessing, we have it at 93% actually, accessing nursery education, although nursery education in Guyana is not compulsory. You don't have to send your children to school at nursery, but we actually have a very high enrollment at that level. So the question is, do we have enough schools? The answer is for primary, yes. Is there overcrowding? There is. So you have population sizes that have grown. Take Tushen. I don't know if you know where Tushen is. It's over the Demerara River.
I know it, yeah.
It's actually East Bank, Essequibo. But it's on the west coast of the Demerara Bridge, Demerara River. And Tushen started up as my friend went to Tushen when we went to school. I had a girl in my class, one of my best friends, and we've remained close, that came from Tushen, her and her sisters. and their parents were teachers. When they went to school, it was fine because you had a particular number. The PPP has since expanded the community of Tushan by giving out massive numbers of house lots. It's a whole housing scheme, a new house, actually 2 new housing schemes in that community. One school was built, and that school is overflowing right now. So we actually need to build another school there in Tushan, and we're about to do that. The community of Parfait Harmony. Do you know that? Westminster. It's just as you go over the Demerara Bridge. West Coast Demerara again. That community has grown tremendously from when the school first got placed there. Kururu on the east bank, Susdike area. We just built a primary school there. We're going to open it for September because while we had primary schools before, a whole almost itinerant community started up there where people have now made their permanent homes in that place. We have 738 students in Region 3 from the migrant community, Venezuela returnees, Venezuelan migrants, immigrants, that kind of thing. So you have 738 students that the school system didn't cater for before. So to answer you, do we have enough schools? We do. Do we need to expand some? Do we need to rehabilitate some? Absolutely, yes. We're currently looking at that. So what I want to give to Cabinet in a very short week or two is to say, here's where we have schools. Here is where we need more schools at each level, nursery, primary, secondary. Here are the schools that need serious rehabilitation because they're run down. Here are the schools that we actually have to extend. We have to put on a lab, or we have to put on 2 more classrooms. And this is the approximate cost of all of this so that we have a full picture of where we are.
Breakfast in school. Are all students from all primary schools issue breakfast in the morning, or some?
No. So what happened is APNU replaced they said they weren't giving the $10,000. They were going to replace it with a breakfast program. Many people don't know that breakfast program never started in Region 2. The whole of Region 2, nobody ever got the breakfast. If you want to say they discriminated against the people of Region 2, don't, because the Region 10 people, nowhere in Region 10 got the breakfast either. So it wasn't discrimination, it was just high incompetence. Nowhere on the East Bank got the breakfast program. 3 schools in Berbice got breakfast. So the question you ask is if it will be for every student. No, it will not. It's going to be for grade 6 students all across the country. And hinterland and riverine communities are the students there right now are receiving hot meals, whether it's breakfast or lunch. There was a really nice video recently, Annette Arjun took it because she's in the hinterland a lot. I think it's on my page and the ministry's page, where students had chicken curry and rice, and they were going in a very orderly manner to collect it from the kitchen. So that program was started again by the Barjack Day presidency across the country. We've been recognized repeatedly by the World Bank, by the Global Partnership for Education as a model country about how we infused not only breakfast into the school system, which saw more attendance and better results, but how we created village economies out of that process. Because, for example, the people in the hinterland, there's a peanut butter and cassava bread program, and the peanut butter comes from the village. The villagers make that. The cassava bread is made by the village. So you have a whole village economy that was created to satisfy that need. And we've been recognized and hailed up for that a couple of times. Well,
I know you might not be responsible for this, might be the traffic department, but up the East Coast, going from Georgetown to Rosignol, or Georgetown to Maikoni, the speed limit is reduced in school zones, and there's students crossing across the road. But it's not happening beyond Maikoni, West Coast, Berbice. It's not happening up the Quarantine. And some parts of the East Bank, it's not there either. Why is that?
Look, I think the country is coming into a place where we have to grow, and I feel like we have the appetite for it now. the people of this country, of course, not all, but that never happens everywhere in the world, anywhere in the world, for a little bit more order in the way we do things. And so recently we were talking about what happens if you're caught drunk driving the first time, the second time, the third time, and we're actually taking legislation to Parliament. What can happen as a penalty? You know, you all have in the north, you have perfected how you deal with drunk drivers, but as you and I know, that hasn't stopped drunk driving. It hasn't stopped deaths from drunk driving, but you have done far better than we have been able to do. Those are some of the new things we have to look at in this new Guyana we're trying to create. What are some of the things we will tolerate? What are some things we will not tolerate? How do we move to the next level? And in that examination, we will find things that we do well and that we want to keep the same way. We'll find things we want to preserve, although they may seem old-fashioned. But definitely there are some things we need to change. How people use the roadways is definitely one of those. The level of rudeness that you will come across from drivers and so on is you know, can be alarming sometimes.
As Minister, you know, there is bullying in school and crime has increased in school. Gang violence has taken over some schools. How you intend to deal with those problems?
Well, I don't know yet that I am prepared to go as widely as you to say gang violence has taken over. This is what I can say, that some of what we are seeing now, we haven't seen before. Two things I want to say about that very quickly on the heel. One, it doesn't mean it didn't happen before. It means we weren't seeing it before. Everybody has a phone now. Everybody has a camera phone. So you're seeing a lot more visibly in front of you things that happened before. When I was at school, people drank baby bubbly. I mean, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that we should leave it alone because this always happened. I'm just saying it has happened. My classmates, although I never knew that, could tell me about instances of drug use that happened in the school or where there were drugs found and so on. They used to have something called 5-0. People drank 5. That's alcohol. So this happened. We are seeing more instances of it now because everybody could show you that it's happening. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of our children were home. The majority of our children were home for 2 years without supervision in 2 of their most formative years. So some of where we're seeing bad behavior, you would be surprised to learn that it's the first form of seeing bad behavior from. But I'm not surprised because what you did was you left a 10-year-old from 10 to 12 to grow up by themselves without supervision, without guidance. Parents were out working. There was no teacher to pull you in line. And then we just threw them back in the classroom and expected everything to be normal. Today, I was speaking to a teacher who told me about a student not understanding the arsenal space. So he seemed to be invading that space. Now, I am not sure if I'm prepared as yet to say the student is aggressive or if to say this failure to socialize for years may be causing that kind of behavior. So we actually need to, in a concentrated, very organized, almost through a curriculum, teach back some things that kids ought to have known in those 2 years from coming to school. Don't walk up to somebody, don't call people names. Some of the very, very basic things that you correction for if you were in school for the last 2 years. So we are still learning and more will unfold. The effects of COVID and staying home, we're still learning about some of that. How can we deal with it? So that was your question. First of all, I don't think it's something we should pretend is not existent. Secondly, I don't think it's something we should become paralyzed in fear about. And so getting the police involved, getting welfare involved, and other people who could possibly influence the young people we're talking about and talking to involved are all things we are doing. The police has been at several schools recently. I'm speaking to some pastors later this week to be able to go into, so that they could go into schools and do some consistent, not just a spot check and this talk on morals, but to be almost a mentor in the school, because a lot of the students also, we're also finding that they're from single parent homes. Now, I don't want to stigmatize single parent homes, because I've seen single parent homes, and we all know them, which have produced incredible, well-rounded, sound, productive adults. So not every single parent home has problems, but we are seeing a preponderance. It's weighing heavily against, well, people who are children who have some behavioral problems might be coming out of single parent homes where the mother is the parent at home. And so pastors who can play the father role to these children could be helpful. So it's not one thing or another. It's trying several things. Were you hungry? Is that why you stole from your classmate? Well, let's give you a meal. Are you playing the fool because you think nobody could hit you or nobody could do anything? Well, there are different means of discipline that we will be implementing. Here's what they are. You're to sign on to understanding what the rules are, and that if you break them, these will be the punishments and so on. So there are very many different things. What I could tell you is this: I refuse to throw up my hands and say, and this is the position of the entire ministry, and I'm very grateful for that, that we enable these children, the parents got to mind them, and we can just let them go down the drain. We are taking back our schools. Any school that thinks they were on a path to a bad place. I saw complaints from parents openly and teachers on Facebook about a particular Georgetown-based high school, and we've already made some changes there that are going to be significant in how we're taking back that school.
One last question before my colleague comes in. As you may or may not know this, while a lot of schools lack sanitary facilities and products, and teachers are asking, this was told to me through many schools because I crisscross the country, teachers are asking students to bring toilet paper to school, detergent, soap, and so forth. Is that the process, is that the procedure of the education department, or the teachers are respecting their boundaries? I want you to clarify this once and for all. Are teachers allowed to ask students to bring these things to school?
So it depends. I would be lying if I said here all our facilities were perfect. The fact that you have 1,000 children using 8 toilets or even 20 toilets, the traffic is heavy. And so in your own home, you know that ever so often you have to replace the toilet seat. When you have children and the taps and all that, when you have 1,000 kids using this every day, there is breakage, and sometimes the repair does not happen as quickly as it should, because procurement of services is a process. You have to go out and bid to see who will repair these things and so on. And so sometimes this repair happens because of the sloth in the system, because we're trying to comply with procurement rules and laws and so on. On the issue of the supply of materials, I'm presently meeting with my staff. We should not be requiring students to bring materials, but I don't know that we have advanced ourselves into a place where we're procuring sensibly. So when we got $20, we were buying these 10 things. Now that we have $200,000, we haven't reformed how we're purchasing. And that's what we're looking at. Things like toilet paper, cardboard, soaps, and so on should not be something we're asking students for. So we're looking to see, could we get these things delivered and monitored by a company where every time you run out of toilet paper and liquid soap, they supply it? Could we give grants to schools? So we have found that we're doing that in Georgetown, and that's working to an extent where you give money to the school and the school replenishes these things as they see fit. So different means. So it's happening. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, no, we don't ask children for things. The schools are asking, and there is some level of disrepair in some of these sanitary facilities. But we're looking to see how we could better address things when they break and when they run out in a more efficient and a smooth way without breaking any of the.
So teachers are not supposed to be asking students to bring any of these things to school.
Well, it depends. We are not, if you can help. Look, I'm very familiar with private schools and how they are performing, and the fees are heavy in some of them, and they ask every day for something or the other, because to expose your children to experiments and practical work and really integrating what they learned academically or theoretically, with having them understand in a practical way how some of these things work, will require some investment. It shouldn't be that a parent who can't afford it has a child who suffers. So we have to look at making sure models exist, but then we also have to look at priorities. I know parents who have 2 phones, and there's nothing wrong with that. We want people to have a good quality of life. We want people to enjoy all the things that the country is going to have to offer. But you can't have 2 phones and they're fully accredited and they have credit to call and gaff with everybody and go on Facebook and do everything else, but you can't give $200 to your child. So sometimes it's a priority issue too. Or we see fathers drinking beers very liberally Friday night and Saturday night, but they have nothing to offer in terms of their children's education. And like I said, I don't think anything is wrong if drinking a beer is how you relax. We'd like you to be a happy citizen, but it shouldn't come over and above your child's education either.
Okay.
Expect fathers to come out to you.
All right, Minister.
No, I
know you in with the bullying in school, and I know we have limited time, and I really want to ask you to tell our audience, what other plans you have for the ministry. But one of the things with bullying in school is that I've seen it happening in the US, is that the fathers in the community come together also to support the school system. And when the boys see, a male figure in the school, I guess they kind of control themselves. So maybe that's something else you look at. Is there anything you want to tell us, Minister, concerning your vision for the next year or two? What will the Ministry of Education look like by the end of your first term there?
We're going to have for sure more trained teachers in the system. That will go significantly towards your quality, the quality you're going to get from the children, because the quality input is going to be significantly better. So I hope by 20, you said 2 years, so we're at 2022 now. By 2024, we'll have 100% of our teachers either trained or in training. Then, so you could look forward to that. Your access is going to be significantly better. We promised that we would have universal secondary education in this first term. And that means that all across the country, children could access a secondary school. That is a very expensive enterprise, but I hope that we're 85% there by the time 3 years is up. You're going to see resources in the schools, such as textbooks and cardboard and cleaning agents, more regularized. And that sounds like a small issue. Is that an accomplishment? It would be, because it calls for some organization. You're going to see curriculum change better reflect our understanding of the different levels of students we are putting into high school. So the student who goes, or the student who gets a school after attaining only 30% at the common entrance should not be treated as the student who got 96% at the common entrance throughout high school. You're going to see a better literacy level across the country because of specific interventions taken. So you're going to see some significant changes along those lines. And then you have some softer changes. We're still putting children out of the classroom because we don't like their braids, or we don't like their afro, or we don't believe they should have an afro. That is not something that could be tolerated in a 2022 Guyana. We don't have guidance and counseling officers in the schools. So people are unsure about what to do as if they encounter emotional difficulties or abuse or so on at home. They're also unsure about what careers to take. So you're going to see a change in that. Your school managers, head teachers, and deputy heads, and more exposed to managerial type training. So there's quite a bit in store for the system. We're looking to get more access. That means more children can go into schools comfortably and get a better quality. Once you get into the classroom and you're sitting there, there must be a better quality education that better reflects what our needs are in the country as children exit the school system. You're going to see more persons trained from tertiary institutions, whether they're TVET type training or masters and PhDs. We promised 20,000 scholarships. By the end of this year, we would have given already 12,000. And the Vice President has made it very clear that as GS of the party, General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, if anybody wants to train, he's not going to stop. We're not going to stop at 20,000. 20,000 was the minimum that we were willing to train. The university has as its goal one person in every household, to have graduated one person in every household by 2050, at least one person. 2030, sorry, in every household. So you'll see that kind of development. We don't want to see high rises and smooth roads and better bridges alone. We want to see those things. But we also want a type of citizen and student who is able to take care of that, who is able to distinguish between accurate information and false information, who is able to understand their own civic duty in this country to contribute back to the nation state. So we have a huge task, a much bigger task than the person building a bridge, if I may say so, which has, it's very definite in its structure, very definite in what is required to keep it standing and strong and all that. We actually have so many variables when we're dealing with children and students that I think if there were a job in this country that could make a difference, but is also very technical and difficult and requires us in the ministry to constantly be reevaluating our own ability as well as the means we choose to do things. It is the education sector.
Minister, you have a very ambitious plan there, and we want to wish you all the best. You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to get those achieved. If you can achieve them, that will be magnanimous for Guyana. Do we have smart classes?
We do. We have smart classrooms. We have schools that are now, we won't be building any new school without smart classrooms now.
Okay.
So it's going to be a thing that is built in, and we already have transformed. I think we can say that we have 100% of our primary schools that have computer labs, but we've moved away from just labs now. We're talking about smart classrooms and so on. And we're trying to make sure the secondary schools are so equipped.
Minister, it was indeed a great pleasure to have you. You have given us a lot of information, and I think the people of Guyana can rest assured they're in good hands. The children have a minister who takes care, who wants to see that the children achieve their dreams. So we want to thank you and your ministry for having such a great plan. I wish you all the best in achieving those plans.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'd be happy to come back at any point, Dr. Rose.
Without doubt, yeah. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
No, Minister, could you stay back just for a minute after the program?
Sure.
Okay, Minister. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rose, our audience out there, to Devin and to all our sponsors, everyone else. Thank you so much. God bless our great country of Guyana. Thank you.
Oh.